Hello and welcome to Patriot Come Lately Talk Radio. This is Stefan, your host, British by birth, American by choice. The Founding Fathers crafted some remarkable documents that led to the creation of a great country founded on liberty and self-reliance. I have lived in the Euro-socialist nightmare, and I'm doing what I can to return this country to the vision that the Founding Fathers gave us. We need to strive to rebuild that shining city on the hill, for without us, the world has nowhere to turn for freedom. For the next hour, I will be presenting news, views, and guests that help keep the true spirit of America alive. And good evening, good afternoon, good morning, whenever or wherever you're listening to the show. This is Stefan, your Patriot Come Lately, welcoming you from Hotlanta again, or just north of Hotlanta, to episode 229. Yes, that's right, 229. And tonight we've got lots of topics, but the two main topics are going to be about an egregious example of crony capitalism. Well, you can hardly call it crony capitalism. It's more like crony socialism. But we'll talk about that later. And voter fraud, but plenty of other things to talk about as well. And like to say hi to everybody that is listening live or listening to the recordings. Obviously, those of you that are listening live, please join me in the chat room. I see that Rex has already jumped in there. Good evening, Rex. And Paul has arrived as well, and something special from Paul, so get to that in a moment. And just want to remind everybody else that's not live, just thank you for listening to me via the other means of rebroadcast, whether it's Red State Talk Radio or some of the stations that broadcast the Red State Talk Radio network. And anybody who is actually listening live, come on over and join us in the chat room. Love to see you there. Anyway, what I always say to folks, even if you can't be live in the chat room, do send me an email. There are different ways to do that. I say you can send an email to stefan@patriotcomelately.us, but you can also go to my site, www.patriotcomelately.us, and use the contact form, which is something that that my regular live listener, Paul, did. He sent me a comment on, last week or the week before. There was I had a piece about one of the public service unions reacting to a contribution by the Koch brothers to the United Negro College Fund, and as an example of liberal hypocrisy, which Paul actually agreed with, and agreed with my contention that it wasn't not about helping the children, which is really the most important thing, but they were just trying to make a political point. So, yes, and talking about another comment, he said that they are more intolerant and hypocritical than any right-wing group I could think of. Well, Paul, I've got some more hypocrisy and unbelievable stuff tonight. But a lot of topics, so I need to get to them. But just a reminder to everybody, just like Paul's email, do contact me. I will try and read them out on the show, and also send a reply via normal email as well. And by the way, Paul, I noticed your email looks as if you have something to do with Mercy flights. Is that anything? Does that mean you're a pilot who flies people, very often sick people who can't can't afford or normal commercial flights or need to get somewhere very quickly. If so, thanks for that. That is an amazing service that you do there. And even if you're not actually a pilot, but you're helping people do that, it really is a very worthwhile service. So thank you for that. Well, why don't we go straight to this intolerance and hypocrisy that Paul complained about in his email. And I picked up something that was published in the Washington Free Beacon, and it talks about education reformer and former CNN host Campbell Brown. I think in the years gone back, used to watch CNN before Fox News was there, and even occasionally when I couldn't, in the days when hotels would only have CNN and not Fox News, Campbell Brown was there, and she tends to be rather, I thought even at the time, slightly more left of centre, but she's left CNN and she's now turned into an education reformer, which I guess puts her more right of centre. But anyway, so as education reformer, she started a court case recently to challenge teacher tenure. Now, you sort of think, well, why should teachers have tenure? Taxi drivers don't have tenure. People working in an office don't have tenure, so why should teachers have it? Right? Just something that those awful unions kind of insisted on writing in there. So she started a challenge against that. Well, after she started that, she had to deal with a series of vile Twitter attacks from teachers, trolls, porn people, and that can only be them, because if you look at the absolute vile language that was used, absolutely unbelievable. I can't read from the actual text, so if you go to the Washington Free Beacon, if you want to see for yourself, but just be very aware, it is very definitely NSFW, not suitable for work, not NSFF, not suitable for families. It really is just unbelievable how disgustingly vile these left-wing troglodytes were in attacking her. Now, I can understand that you wish to express opinion that you disagree with. It's your right. That's our country. So if she says she doesn't believe in teacher tenure, starts a court challenge, come up with some good arguments and say why it is a good thing and attack her that way. But all this was just absolutely vile language. As I said, I can't read any of it, because otherwise I have to mark my show as containing explicit material. But it was just absolutely vile and has absolutely nothing to do with debating. In actual fact, I think it made the whole thing look like some kids on a playground trying to use adult speech and just looking like 5-year-olds. And I think the people that are doing this probably were. Maybe not in physical age, but definitely in terms of mental development. Well, it's no wonder the country is so divided when people think that the way to debate is to use vile language and personally attack someone just because of their own beliefs, their own ideas about something. People like these a-holes expressing their puerile thoughts just contribute so much to that divisiveness in the country. I think they would be better off getting a job writing for Larry Flint's Hustler. They seem to have the necessary word usage pretty down pat. And so let's go on to the next topic. But very quickly before I do, Paul has admitted that while he uses that nickname in his email address, he says he's not that noble. It's just something he uses in his email. Well, at the very least, Paul, you're noble enough to use that and remind people that these sort of services exist. And so good for you for that. Okay, next topic. FCC cronyism. And if you thought that some of the topics we've had before would make your head explode, then this is another one of those that's probably as bad as anything I've had over the last few weeks. This was an article in the Wall Street Journal by Holman W. Jenkins. I think it was an op-ed. And he said, racial spoils are making a comeback at the FCC after being put mostly to rest in an important 2006 reform. So basically what happened in a quiet, non-public vote, let me stress that, quiet, non-public vote, Chairman Tom Wheeler and his fellow 2 Democrats, there are actually, if I'm not mistaken, 5 people on the FCC board, 3 Democrats and 2 Republicans. So Democrats have the majority, of course, because, the White House appoints the board. So what else would you expect? Corruption. It's being led by somebody appointed by the White House. Well, guess what? So Tom Wheeler and his fellow 2 Democrats approved a waiver for minority entrepreneur David Grain, allowing him a 25% discount in this fall's Spectrum auction. There's going to be an auction, I believe in November, probably just after the election, when all the telecom companies want to basically buy more spectrum for using for their cell broadcasts. Anybody's allowed to bid there, and there is a rule that minority companies get a 25% discount on bidding. So that means they can bid less than the others. Basically, their money counts for 1.25 times anybody else's. Now, to me, that smacks of repatriations. What happened to the colorblind society? I thought we were past the color divide with the election of a black president. But as we've seen, in actual fact, he's just made things worse, more divisive, more affirmative action, and this is it. Is this a way of doing repatriations, redistribution of wealth? It's a form of racism, or perhaps you should call it reverse racism, that you're favored because of your race. But what's even worse, it was a quiet, non-public vote. So trying to keep it on the quiet. That's why I'm bringing this forward. We need to tell you. Now, he had to be given a waiver on this because he's already had some spectrum allocated to him on this similar rule, and therefore he's not actually eligible for any more spectrum because he's already had some at a discount. And what he did, he acquired these spectrum licenses as part of a swap between AT&T and Verizon, and then he just leases back these spectrum licenses to AT&T and Verizon. So a very nice little windfall there. He gets something on the cheap, and then he can sell it back to AT&T, Verizon at market price. Now, just the fact that he already has this should have made him ineligible for bidding credits. And especially because all he does is flip it. Credits aren't supposed to be available to those who are merely looking to flip the spectrum for easy profits. It's meant to help minority companies that wish to use the spectrum licenses to set up their own telecom companies. Now, this is not the only thing in favor of Mr. Gaines' private equity fund. Last year, and listen to this name, you may recognize it, Acting Chairman Mignon Clyburn, yes, that's right, daughter of Representative James Clyburn, who's the sort of assistant something or other in the House, because Nancy Pelosi appointed him to that role when she lost the speakership, because basically what happened, everybody bumped down one level on the hierarchy, and that meant he didn't get his perks of a chauffeur-driven car, etc. So she created a new title, and then basically said this one is also eligible for the perks that he'd had before but had lost. Corruption. But anyway, so last year, Clyburn's daughter, who was appointed to the FCC, corruption. Well, I see it's time for a break. Let's go to a break, and I'll tell you about what this young lady, this person did to favor Mr. Grain in the past, and just more corruption. So let's go to break, and I will be back right after these messages.
Patriot Come Lately. British by birth, American by choice. Just like the Founding Fathers. The voice of the conservative resistance.
Attention! Have you been in a serious automobile accident? Then you need to call our attorneys now. We specialize in helping our clients get compensated for major auto injuries. If you've been in any type of car or motorcycle accident and you've been seriously injured, you may be entitled to significant financial compensation. Our attorneys have recovered millions and millions of dollars for injured clients. There are no out-of-pocket costs to you ever. We only receive a fee when we win your case. We are available 24/7. If you've been in an accident and been seriously injured, make this free call to our attorneys now. Call the Personal Injury Center at 800-634-1315. 800-634-1315. 800-634-1315. That's 800-634-1315. This ad is paid for by participating member law firms. We are not an attorney referral service. Representation may not be available in your state.
This is Patriot Come Lately Talk Radio, coming to you live via the internet, via rebroadcast on WRSDB, the Red State Talk Radio Network, or from the recordings at archives.patriotcomelately.us. And we're back. Thanks for sticking with me through that break. This is Stefan, your Patriot Come Lately. We were talking about the FCC making all special waivers to allow a minority company basically earn more money for no reason, basically against the law, because they're changing the law to suit their own requirements. And this is a person called Grain, who has a private equity fund, Grain Management. And I was just saying that Mignon Clyburn, who was acting chairwoman last year, and I reminded you that she's the daughter of James Clyburn, the representative, pretty high up in the Democratic Party. Interesting that his daughter gets a plum job on the FCC, isn't it? More corruption. Anyway, Mignon Clyburn approved that swapping of spectrum, which then required a certain number of licenses to be sold to Mr. Grain so he could lease it back to AT&T and Verizon. Now, of course, the question is, with the latest waiver that he's had, which allows him the special 25% credit on the auction, what happens if he can actually bid enough to win more airwaves in the upcoming auction? Nobody expects a minority or woman-owned small business to raise the billions it would take to battle the big boys in today's now mature wireless scrum. Yes, it takes billions to set up your own wireless company. But Tom Wheeler, the chairman appointed by Dear Leader, has a solution for that as well. he made another waiver that would allow Mr. Grain to turn around and lease any of those newly acquired airwaves to the big boys. In other words, he's just allowing this minority owner to buy things on the cheap and then sell it at a higher price back to the big boys. And again, as I said before the break, this was not the intention of the law that was put in there to help minority companies get airwave licenses so they could start up their own companies. Now, Mr. Grain is supported by a group called the Minority Media and Telecommunications Council, a civil rights lobby group. Civil rights lobby group. Civil rights, what does this have to do with civil rights? Well, okay. So minorities don't get a fair shake of the stick. We give them a fair shake of the stick, and what do? They corrupt it and do things with it that they're not supposed to. So, folks, do you wonder why we're against this? But the MMTC has done something even more. They've sent a white paper to the FCC, and Tom Wheeler has taken under advisement. This white paper argues that the minimum handout to minority bidders should be boosted to 40%. Folks, this, as I said before, this is just pure repatriations. They couldn't get it through any other way, so this is just a way to give money to minorities, to give money to black people. Yes, I've said it. For all the bad things that we ever did to them. Or you can see it as redistribution of wealth, socialism. Although I'm pretty certain Mr. Grain is no poor person out of the ghetto. He may have come out of the ghetto, but he's certainly not living there now. This is just pure corruption. And we have to stop it. We have to get these sort of things stopped once and for all, because this is just absolutely disgusting. The writer of this article, what was it? Yeah, Holman Jenkins says, it's good occasionally to be reminded, well, I don't know if it's good, I wouldn't agree with that, but we are reminded how readily politics defaults to Putinism. Exactly. This is no better than what's going on in Russia, all the corruption there. Enriching its favorites is what government would do every day, every minute, if not watched closely. But why is this happening now? Because the media allows anything that this corrupt regime does to go totally unanswered. Well, totally. I think signs are coming that people are beginning to get fed up, but up to now, it's been totally unlooked at or anything. And of course, the political rulers, if you find yourself in a hole, dig harder, and that maybe explains Tom Wheeler's sudden reckless support of MMTC's minority spoils goals. He finds himself in a deepening hole, and the deepening hole is his troubled net neutrality gambit. Because, of course, the FCC has been trying to push net neutrality and trying to make sure that everybody is able to use the net on a fair basis. Of course, some of these big companies like Comcast and Verizon, AT&T, trying to hog it and make sure that upstarts like Netflix, etc., don't get good use of the net. So the FCC said, we're going to jump in, we're going to put in rules that everybody can use it fairly. But people in Silicon Valley and all over the net are up in arms about it, because basically it ends up the government getting involved where it doesn't need to be involved, and basically turning the net just like electricity utility, and all the rules. And I've done projects at electric companies and other utility companies. If you see the reporting that they have to do to the government to kind of justify everything they do and their investments and their costs and everything, it is absolutely unbelievable what they have to do. So Tom Wheeler got into a fix trying to push this net neutrality. Everybody's against it. And now, of course, he's got this. So it looks, the writer of the article said, one sacrifice the country is going to have to make to save the internet from regulatory overkill is to lose the 2006 reforms to the minority spectrum bidding regime. Well, I don't see why we can't have both of them. This is absolutely disgusting. Everything these rules in the 2006 reforms were meant to prevent unjust overnight enrichment of politically favored bidders will again become the purpose of the rules. So everything is being turned around, which is just par for the course, but it still gets my goat. I am still really, really uptight, annoyed about this. Now, what about Mr. David Grain's background? Of course, after the announcement of this special waiver, people started digging in. Well, let's see what he does on the political front. What a surprise. He was a big Obama bundler and lately has been very generous to South Carolina Rep. James Clyburn, who, as I said, had his daughter appointed, Mignon Clyburn, to the FCC. So the writer of this article actually says the importance of donations can be overstated. Yeah, right. No, this is just pure corruption. Why don't we call it what it is? Absolute pure corruption. But even so, and as the writer of the article said, in any case, he may be a fine person. Yeah, right, corrupt as hell. But his windfall is coming straight from the taxpayer's pocket. So that's even worse. They're taking our money and giving it to a person just because they're black. Now, I have nothing against black people. But why should we give something to a person just because they're black or yellow or green or white? I thought we were past this racial division. And, of course, and the final sentence in the article, which sort of says to me, yes, the lamestream media is beginning to be less flattering about the regime, because he says this episode also adds a perverse luster to Mr. Wheeler's record of finding new ways to bring unflattering attention to his agency. He came to his job with rare technological and business chops and knowing his industry's Washington landscape inside out. However, like a lot of appointees who look good on paper, he turns out to be a clumsy politician whose clumsiness now threatens to turn into a full-blown scandal. So, of course, but I mean, what else do you expect from a corrupt regime? They appoint corrupt, incompetent people, and this is what we get. Folks, I've said it before, I'm going to say it again. We need to get out. We need to turn the Senate around. We need to keep the House. Hopefully that's not going to be an issue. But we need to turn the Senate around big time. Not just the 6 that the GOP need. We need to get a significant larger number there. Ideal would be to get up and have a 66 veto-proof majority. Highly unlikely to happen. But it's... Walter Elias Disney said, if you can dream it, you can do it. So let's dream it. But either way, we need to win the Senate because we need to get Harry Reid stop him from sitting on the 378 bills or whatever it is that are currently on his desk and he's not doing anything with. And then we can start also... doing something to get to rein in these corrupt actions by appointees in things like the FCC, the EPA, the IRS, etc. And the easiest way to do that is to turn down the money spigot. And when the money spigot goes down, you have to get rid of people. And as there are civil service rules that people can't be fired, but if there's no money, then of course people do have to be fired. And then it's just first in, last in, first out. And that's, of course, exactly what we want, because the people who came in last were appointees of Dear Leader, and we need to get rid of them. Okay, folks, we're at the halfway point of the show. Time for another commercial, and I will be back right after these messages.
Reporting from the eye of the storm. This is the worst weather we've seen in quite some time, folks. And I don't see any end in sight. People have been calling in from across the state complaining their basements are flooding. One guy said he now has an indoor swimming pool in his basement. I told him he needs the waterproofing innovations from Basement Systems. If you want a dry basement or crawl space that will weather any kind of storm, you need the patented solutions from Basement Systems. You've seen them on home makeover shows throughout the country. With a lifetime warranty, every solution is custom designed for your basement. Call now for a free estimate, and you'll never have to worry about storms like these again. I'm predicting this storm front is heading your way, so call Basement Systems and relax.
Call 800-205-8665 for your free in-home inspection, or visit basementradiooffer.com. That's 800-205-8665, or visit basementradiooffer.com.
I've owned my company for 14 years now, and I can tell you that payroll is a 4-letter word. I hate doing it. It eats up hours I don't have, and it costs me money I could be saving. But my accountant's too expensive, and I'm not sure who to call. But I know I need help.
We're Paychex, and we take all the hassles out of small business payroll. We save you time and money. It's easy. Call, fax, or give us your payroll information securely online, and we take care of the rest. We calculate the correct taxes, manage payments and direct deposits. We even send out your checks. Payroll doesn't need to be a 4-letter word anymore. We're so sure that we can save you time and money that we'll give you a month's payroll free. Just for calling 877-750-5371. Get 1 month's payroll for free. Call Paychex right now. 877-750-5371. That's 877-750-5371.
This is Patriot Come Lately Talk Radio, coming to you live via the internet, via rebroadcast on WRSDB, the Red State Talk Radio Network, or from the recordings at archives.patriotcomelately.us. And thanks for sticking around, folks. This is Stefan, your Patriot Come Lately, British by birth, American by choice. And we're into the second half of the show. Before we get on to the next topic, a couple of things. I do want to thank folks again for listening to the show. Those of you that listen via Red State Talk Radio Network. I was number 3 in the in terms of the average number of listeners per show last month. Really appreciate that. And, I've said it before, for broadcasters, the numbers are important, and it's like a drug. You need more and more. So do me a favor, folks. Tell your friends about the show. Get them to listen either live or via the different channels, especially Red State Talk Radio. But, get people listening. It has a good reason as well. We need to get all these messages out before the November elections, which, if I'm not mistaken, are something like 83 days away. Not long, folks. So we've got a lot of work to do. Let's get the messages out. And for those of you that are listening live, you can participate in the chat room. Little green speech bubble at the bottom right hand part of the screen, I believe. For those of you that are listening to any of the rebroadcasts, the way to contact me is through email or through my website. And here's just a little clip to give you a bit more information about that. If you would like to comment on any of the topics discussed on the show, please email me via stefan@patriotcomelately.us or go to the show's website, www.patriotcomelately.us, and click on the contact button. You can also write your comments on the show's Facebook page. Just search in Facebook for the Patriot Come Lately Show. So there you are, folks, and do contact me. I'd love to hear from you, and thanks again to Paul for emailing. It's nice to know that people have some ideas about what I'm saying, and whether you agree, disagree, whether you have questions, feel free to contact me. The first half of the show, we were talking about, really cronyism and corruption in the government. And one of the things I think that people are forgetting is that the government works for us. It's not us that work for them. And, of course, there was one person that put that very well, and that was dear Ronnie.
And this idea that government is beholden to the people, that it has no other source of power except the sovereign people, is still the newest and the most unique idea in all the long history of man's relation to man. This is the issue of this election. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government, or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves. You and I are told increasingly we have to choose between a left or right. Well, I'd like to suggest there is no such thing as a left or right. There's only an up or down. Man's old age dream, the ultimate in individual freedom consistent with law and order, or down to the ant-heap of totalitarianism.
And don't you think dear Ronnie puts that so well? Well, that's what we're fighting. And in order to do that, we have to make sure that we have free and fair elections. I've mentioned a number of times on the show that great organization called True the Vote, and if you're looking for things to do, obviously supporting candidates is a great thing, but another great way of helping and making sure that we get a good government is by supporting True the Vote and getting signed up with them, getting trained to be a poll watcher, things like that, because we need to stamp out voter fraud. And the other main topic for tonight's show, and this is actually this is something I've been carrying over the last 3-4 shows, so it's more than a month old. But I never got round to any of the earlier shows, and I said, this week I really want to bring it up. This was something that was published in the National Review Online, and it's a series of examples showing how easy it is to actually commit voter fraud. Now, the regressives always say, oh, we don't need to do anything about voter fraud because there is no fraud, right? Or there's no fraud involving people voting in person at the polls, in spite of the lady in, where was it, I think Ohio, who admitted to voting 6 times for Obama. But there are many others, and we never hear about them. So I want to bring these to your attention. Let's start first of all. New York City's watchdog Department of Investigations, this is a department that's supposed to basically audit, or not audit, but investigate other government departments, city government departments, and keep them honest, just provided latest evidence of how easy it is to commit voter fraud in that city. DOI undercover agents showed up at 63 polling places last year and pretended to be voters who should have been turned away by election officials, assuming the names of individuals who had died, moved out of town, or were sitting in jail. In 61 instances, so that's 97% of the time, 61 of 63, think about that, folks. Basically, almost every single time, the testers were allowed to vote. Now, those who did vote cast only a write-in vote for John Test, so as not to affect the outcome of any contest. And then the DOI published its findings 2 weeks ago in a searing 70-page report accusing the city's Board of Elections of incompetence, waste, nepotism, and lack procedures. Well, it must be a Democrat Board of Elections. Just a guess, folks. The Board of Elections in New York has a $750 million annual budget. Again, taxpayer money. And you New Yorkers wonder why you have to pay so much income tax? And a workforce of 350 people reacted in a classic bureaucratic fashion. The board approved a resolution referring the DOI investigators for prosecution. Yes, let's prosecute them because they did something wrong. It also asked the state's Attorney General to determine whether the DOI had violated the civil rights of voters who had moved or who are felons. Well, felons are not allowed to vote, so how can you violate the voting rights of them? And people who have moved out of state, how can you violate their civil rights because they can't vote there either? And it sent a letter of complaint to the mayor. Now, again, as it's most likely that the left are using these tactics to defraud the vote, they can't have people investigating it, so of course the left is going to get into all of a tizzy trying to get it stopped. Greg Sumas, who's president of the Board of Elections, offered a justification for calling in the prosecutors. If something was done in an untoward fashion, it was only done by the DOI. Yes, my people didn't do anything wrong by letting people who shouldn't vote. Of course not. And our reading of election law is such an act constitutes a felony. Well, how about a felony that your people allowed people who are not supposed to be voting to vote? You should be locked up, and you and your people should be locked up, folks. Oh, boy. I mean, this gets it. Now, the board is bipartisan, and all but two of its members voted with Sumas. There were two exceptions. One was a Democrat. He had to abstain because the DOI report implicated him in hiring his wife and sister-in-law for board jobs. Corruption. And a Republican also voted against it. Now, there may be more Republicans on there, but I really fault them for going along with the rest of the regressives and voting. The DOI may have technically done something wrong, but they had to do it to show what was going on there. And therefore, I think any court will throw it out because there has to be, in most cases, you have to prove that there is willful, that what they're doing is willfully bad. And they weren't doing it for that reason. They were doing it to prove that something was wrong. Of course, the good government groups are absolutely surprised by the president of the Board of Elections refusing to smell the stench of corruption in his patronage-riddled empire. And in actual fact, one of the newspapers, probably the New York Post, derided it as a 21st century survivor of Boss Tweed-style politics. Boy, that's a perfect description, folks. And they're also surprised how little media attention their reporters received. Well, of course, because those people pulling the strings in the LSM, remember I said they're just like parrots. They just listen to what somebody in a back room decides they can and cannot write. There is censorship in today's media. Believe me, it may not be government censorship, but it is censorship by the regressives in power that are associated with the government, and they just tell the media what they can and cannot publish. So that's why none of that was done. Some of the details of the DOI report are unbelievable. Young undercover agents were able to vote using the names of people 3 times their age, often people who were dead. In one example, a 24-year-old female agent gave the name of someone who had died in 2012 at the age of 87. The workers at the Manhattan polling site gave her a ballot, no questions asked. Now, there were 2 cases that didn't go through. 61 of 63 did, but two didn't. In the first case, a poll worker on Staten Island walked outside with the investigator who had just been refused a ballot and advised him to go to a polling place near where he used to live and play dumb in order to vote. So in actual fact, talk about corruption. In the second case, the investigator was stopped from voting only because the name he was using happened to be the son of the election official at the polling place. Oh yeah, so the election official has a felon in prison at the time. Yeah, right. Well, that really shows a conflict of interest there. That's just New York, folks. After the break, we're going to talk about some other examples. But it is time for a break, so here we go.
Patriot Come Lately. British by birth, American by choice. Just like the Founding Fathers. The voice of the conservative resistance.
Man, I had a rough night's sleep. Boy, whew, I got a letter from the IRS yesterday and I just couldn't sleep. Man, I'm dying here. Somebody help me.
IRS problems affect more than just your finances. If you're ready to take back control of your life and you owe more than $10,000, you need to call the tax doctor. Their expert staff can immediately protect you from the IRS and state collectors and get you the best possible tax settlement guaranteed. The IRS has recently released new programs geared in helping struggling taxpayers, where you may qualify to settle your tax debt and wipe out up to 85% or more of what you currently owe. If you owe $10,000 or more in back taxes, call the tax doctor right now. See if you qualify to pay less. 800-917-8546. 800-917-8546. 800-917-8546. Again, 800-917-8546.
This is Patriot Come Lately Talk Radio, coming to you live via the internet, via rebroadcast on WRSDB, the Red State Talk Radio Network, or from the recordings at archives.patriotcomelately.us. Hey there, folks. The final segment of the show, we're talking about voter fraud, and as I said at the beginning of this section, let's make sure that we get as fair an election as possible. Sign up with True the Vote if you can, if you've got time. Help them. Please do what you can. They're a great organization, and they will help stop and stamp out this sort of fraud. We won't be able to get rid of all of it, but we can get rid of some of it. So we're talking about New York, but this sort of fraud has happened elsewhere. James O'Keefe sent 3 of his assistants to New Hampshire during the presidential primary in January of 2012. They also asked for several voters, all deceased, and poll workers handed out ballots, never once asking for a photo ID. Now, in this case, O'Keefe's team gave back the ballots, so they didn't vote, so they can't be prosecuted, but they just wanted to show that, that they'd done, that they were able to do what people said couldn't be done. Of course, New Hampshire's Democratic governor, right? Well, what else would you expect from another regressive? Sputtered when asked about the video that they took, and he condemned the effort to test the election system, even though no actual votes were cast, so probably nothing illegal was done. They should be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law, if in fact they're found guilty of some criminal act. Well, I'm sure they weren't, although maybe they can twist it to say just the fact they asked for it, but by giving it back, I think, again, you take it to court, any normal court, but then again, with all these activist judges, can we trust the court? Any normal court would say, throw it out. But anyway, even though there was an exhaustive and intrusive investigation, no charges were ever filed. Now, this next one I really like. because one of O'Keefe's assistants later in 2012 went and did the same trick in Washington, D.C. But instead of using a dead man, this white person went and asked for Eric Holder's ballot. Even though Holder is 62 years old and bears no resemblance to this 22-year-old who also happens to be white. And he was given it. Now, the Department of Justice, which is currently suing Texas to block the state's photo ID law, dismissed the incident as manufactured. The irony was lost on the Department of Injustice that Holder, who's a staunch opponent of voter ID laws, could himself have been disenfranchised by a white man because D.C. has no voter ID law. Wouldn't have that been funny? Illegal, but it would have been funny. Now, polls show that more than 70% of Americans, including clear majorities of African Americans and Hispanics, support voter ID laws. Of course, it's logical. You have to have an ID to get on a plane, buy certain medicines. Why shouldn't you have it to vote? Liberals who oppose these measures claim there are few prosecutions for voter fraud, which they then take to mean fraud doesn't happen. And as I said at the beginning of this section, yes, voter fraud does occur, but it's never published. And just because there are few prosecutions, it's also because a lot of the laws, it's difficult to prove. We know it's happening, but they can't actually prosecute people. And the only way that the only sure way to prosecute someone is to have someone to confess, which, yeah, right. As if they're going to do that. In New York, another thing, they said that poll workers reported people were trying to vote in the name of other registered voters. Police officers observed the problems but did nothing because voter fraud isn't under the police department's purview. I mean, isn't that just absolutely crazy and disgusting? Well, is this a new thing? No, actually. This is something in 1984 in Brooklyn, the Democratic district attorney released a state grand jury report following a 14-year successful conspiracy investigation where thousands of fraudulent votes were cast. The grand jury recommended voter ID, a basic election integrity measure, but New York has steadfastly refused to implement it. So, I mean, folks, don't you see this is just absolutely crazy? And remember, why is this important? Well, a small number of votes can have sweeping consequences. Remember Al Franken's 312-vote victory in 2008 over Norm Coleman? It gave Democrats a filibuster-proof Senate majority of 60 votes. Well, 312 votes. Now, months after the vote, a conservative group called Minnesota Majority finished comparing criminal records with voting rolls and identified 1,099 felons who are all ineligible to vote. But they voted, or somebody voted for them. And do you think that they voted for Norm Coleman? Probably not. In actual fact, in many cases the felons did vote. Fox News randomly interviewed 10 of those felons and found that 9 had voted for Franken. Yeah, and probably of the 1,000, if they were actually felons voting, then that means 900 went. That's 600 votes over that victory. In other words, Franken is there illegally and he should have been thrown out ages ago, but nobody does that. Okay, folks, it's time for the end of the show. Please join me again next week, and remember, please tell your friends about this. We need to keep the message going out. And TT for TTFN. See you next week. Thank you for listening to the show. I hope that you enjoyed tonight's topics. Whether you listened live to a recording or to a rebroadcast, I appreciate the time you share with me. We need to spread the message of liberty far and wide, so please tell your friends and family about the show. Thank you for helping to keep the beacon of hope burning. This is Stefan, your Patriot Come Lately, signing off. God bless America, and remember, L3, long live liberty.